Hi, everybody. So today I have Sara as a guest here on our channel. And Sara and I have known each other for a while. I'll probably open with intros, who I am and who Sara is and how we know each other. So my name is Alicia and I own a private practice and I'm a psych NP. And I also have a mentorship program where I teach other psych NPs how to open private practices. And so Sara and I have been working together for a while. We actually back before I had my program, I was doing one-on-one mentorship, and I was mentoring Sara because you were an AGNP, right, at that time only, and you were looking into going into psych NP school with an ultimate dream of starting a practice. And so now fast forward where we are today. You are dual certified and you have your own practice open now for 3 months. And we're in the same city. We're both in Los Angeles. And so we're going to talk all about Sara's journey and what kind of the ins and outs of an early cash practice looks like. Basically, that's what we'll touch on today. So Sara, tell me about your training and your background. Maybe we'll start there. I gave an intro, but tell me a little bit more.
Thank you. So I graduated from Columbia University with my MSN Adult Gerontology Nurse Practitioner. Worked a couple of years in orthopedic surgery, followed by neurology, and then finally landing in primary care. And then the pandemic hit, so gave birth just before the pandemic and decided to go back to full-time work again because we didn't know what we were dealing with. I had a newborn at home, so I kind of had to reshuffle and rethink how I was going to re-enter the workforce and what kind of specialty. I'd always really enjoyed psych, or at least seen psych, across all the specialties I'd worked in. There'd always been this underlying, psychiatric kind of string going through in terms of anxiety, depression, insomnia, across different specialties.
And so what is your practice mainly focused on?
Sure. So I see children, adolescents, ages 5 to 21 for autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and mood disorders. I'm keeping it quite small and quite tight for now. I will pivot based on what comes through the door. So very much keeping it kind of like the repertoire small and specializing in those, but then based on what patients are asking for, what families are asking for in the LA area, I could change and kind of become more specialized in one area versus the other, for example. And much like yourself, taking, an integrative approach. So being very holistic, very well-rounded, referring out to therapy, referring out for acupuncture, massage, talking about supplementation, talking about, lifestyle modification, all these very common sense things that are sometimes missed or dropped within a traditional medical setting. So I feel that families very much appreciate that, and having a provider who sees the value in that and can offer alternative or at least adjunctive therapeutic, treatment options in addition to our traditional medication management.
Yeah. Sometimes I get asked where did you quote, learn integrative interventions? Do you feel like you kind of picked them up along the way as you worked in neurology and primary care and psychiatry, or did you read a book? What did you do to kind of develop how you do your treatment plans?
Sure. So I feel like at baseline, I've always had an interest in, supplementation and probiotics. I was raised by a mother who was very heavily involved, or at least invested in organic and supplementation and giving us omega-3s and probiotics, making sure that we were, nourished and, very balanced in terms of our lifestyle. So I feel like at my base, at my core, that's always been very, very common theme for me. Yeah. And yes, across the various specialties I've worked in, of course, you come across providers who are proponents for more holistic, integrative interventions. And I've always very much resonated with those particular providers or those nurses or those doctors, and kind of very much wanted to learn from them. You provided us with a couple of recommendations for books on the course that you provide, on the mentorship course. So I went out and I purchased those. So I've flicked through and kind of read through those specific to the supplements that I was specifically interested in. Yeah. And I've looked at, for example, online courses with the bigger bodies out there, such as the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, as well as the Institute of Functional Medicine. Kind of pricey. Yeah, I haven't undergone a course with them. Maybe, it doesn't mean that I won't. Potentially, I'd have to save up and I will in the future to be certified specifically for that. But I mean, there's so many resources available in terms of books you can read or podcasts you can listen to or websites or webinars. There's so much free information on the web with regards to integrative and holistic interventions that want to specialize, well, certify in specifically and have that certificate on your wall. It's so easy to access that information.
Absolutely.
Integrate it into your practice.
Absolutely. And patients, like I've literally, in the time that I've been open and I have an integrative psychiatry practice too. And literally I've had one person ask, what training did you do? And they seemed like a patient that had been like Googling everything, where they were, did you take, and then he kind of listed off a program I'd never heard of, actually. I think maybe he just Googled like, what should a provider have? I literally only had one ask me, but, and I did do a course, but, not like those year-long fellowships or anything. Right. But it's like most of my learning before that was books too, because like you said, there's so much free information. You can have an integrative psychiatry practice and you kind of like learn as you go, see what patients respond to, take CEUs, learn more on the web, like read books. And I think that can get you somewhere. I mean, like functional medicine is kind of a different breed. Functional medicine is like a lot of testing and like that's different. But integrative psychiatry, some of it's a little bit common sense, like teaching people, about healthy eating and like things that like maybe their primary care doctor doesn't have time to explain, like a healthy diet for a child, know.
Yeah.
Whereas we that can choose, and you're like me, we both own cash-based practices. We can choose the length of time we see patients. We could, spend more time, do, really whatever we want to do and, match up our fee for the amount of time and psychoeducation. And we can practice how we want to, which is really liberating, but cool. While we talk about the cash-based practice, a lot of people have this like curiosity about cash-based practices. I get asked a lot, do people actually pay for, out of pocket for mental health care? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
People really can see the value if you say, I'll spend more time with you. You're kind of paying for more time with me, access to like a portal to message me when you need. Not saying that you have to be available at like all hours of the night, but that, you check your portal once a day, answer your patients within 24 to 48 hours, that kind of thing. So a little bit on the concierge side of things, I think we do, but we're not like going to people's houses or doing like home visits. Like we're not really doing that type of concierge, but a little bit high touch, high touch, lower patient panel.
Yes.
And so since you're building what I'm building, a lot of people know my story, but I want to hear all about like your first 3 months and what are you doing to get cash pay patients? How many cash pay patients do you have? That was a lot of questions, but I want to hear about all of it because I'm sure other people want to know too.
So I was under the impression that, I open doors and the patients will be there. Like, nope, you got to do legwork. So that was definitely a learning curve in terms of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, seeing what works. I feel like I did events like, health fairs and, getting out in front of the public. And that wasn't as productive as I had hoped it would be. It was great for networking with other providers because they'd see my booth and my balloons, and then they'd come up to me and we'd exchange cards.
Yeah.
But there are cheaper ways to do it instead of paying $600 for a booth table.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, I've learned that the best way is just networking with other providers, and therapists within kind of your niche, within, who are treating the same patient population as you. And then you talked about touch points and just making contact with the therapists as well at regular intervals, just reminding them that you're available, or reminding, adding value. Like you've previously mentioned during our mentorship course in terms of like, providing presentations potentially, and just, showing that you are accessible, available, able to answer any of their questions, available to case collaborate if they have any questions or concerns about patients they're seeing and whether they would be appropriate referrals to you. So making yourself very available and open to them and being very welcoming. And, it's reciprocated. They have been wonderful and very happy to see me here. And, they appreciate that even as a cash basis, you are filling a need and that you are addressing a need, especially in psychiatry where we have such a shortage. So yes, this first month was kind of a bust, I'd say, in terms of, paying for, adverts, and didn't really yield anything. And then, actually reaching out to therapists locally, and that starting to kind of snowball, and then starting to slowly get referrals from them.
Yeah.
So that was very rewarding and, very flattering as well to have, the therapist that you'd spoken to maybe 2-3 times then say, okay, I have a patient for you. And then to be able with that therapist and like really cement that relationship, build that relationship. And then at some point in the future, you will send a patient to them who needs, CBT or play therapy or whatever it ends up being. So that becomes like a really nice solid basis to build your practice.
Yeah.
So the first month, nothing really happened. It was tumbleweed and I did panic a little bit and started looking into things like Alma, like, oh, do I have to do insurance potentially for a couple of patients and then switch to private? But I thought that would just be too complicated, having those two running in tandem and then having to explain to the insurance patients that, hey, oh, by the way, I'm not cash.
Yeah.
Having that conversation I thought was unfair. And then I didn't want to necessarily do that. So, and then I think like very soon after I got my first, I was like, oh, something's working. It's working. I had my first patient. And then a few weeks go by and there's still tumbleweed. There's nothing, but I was fine because I was so, enwrapped in getting like really giving this patient like gold service and doing all the collaborative calls I needed to do to make sure that everyone was on the same page and making sure I was speaking to the teachers and the therapists and that they were fully taken care of and like talking to the pharmacy daily to make sure they had the medications and really being like overly involved.
Yeah. That's normal. You want to you're like, oh my gosh, it's my first client. I want to do some good. Yeah.
That's standard.
Yes.
And then 2 weeks later, getting my second patient, I'm like, oh, this wasn't just a fluke. I thought it was maybe a one-off. It's not. This is, I know. You're just waiting for the shoe to drop and to be like, and the obviously the imposter syndrome that comes with setting up your own practice and being out there and marketing yourself, and it's real and it feels very hard. But again, your group and having you there and having the mentorship members there to support each other and to share, our losses and our wins was huge. And having that community, because it is very lonely, especially when you're starting out, especially when you're coming up against all these challenges and all these kind of like teething problems in the beginning, to have a group of people you can kind of refer to and say, hey, I've done this. Like, what did someone else do something different? What did someone else try for this particular, scenario? And then having that feedback is wonderful. And obviously the bi-monthly groups you run are huge in terms of just asking your questions in real time and getting those responses back in real time as well. And again, the support and the camaraderie. So that was lovely.
Okay. Yeah. It can be lonely, right? Yeah. Like if I could imagine someone starting a practice without community, they're kind of like this normal.
Yeah.
And I told you, like when there was tumbleweeds the first month, I'm like, yep, that was normal. That was me too.
Thank you for that. I just shut my doors. Oh,
nope.
1 month.
So then, so you got your first patient after a couple weeks, in your second month, and then a second patient a couple weeks later. Then how did it go?
Third and the fourth, and now I'm at about 8 or so.
8 at 3 months, about 3 months in. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, that's like under 3 patients a month, which isn't bad. I was carrying myself like 1 a month, maybe if I was lucky. So this has been huge. And again, I thank you for that, for setting expectations, and also the networking is huge.
Yeah, it's huge. That's why that's what I teach in the program is like network marketing and like building a really good word of mouth network, because really, if you just are persistent and solid with that, like that alone, as you're seeing, can fill a cash-based practice, because everyone loves word of mouth. Everyone likes to be like, hey, I got a guy for that. Like a lot of my patients now come from my patients. Like my patients will say, oh, another kid at my child's school has ADHD too. Can you see them? Or, because I think that's the best and then that's the same thing when you're building network with the therapist, where they're like, oh, I met this really wonderful psych NP. She can see you for meds. I really liked her. She seemed holistic and she's going to talk to me. And, like having that like testimonial to somebody is bigger than someone finding you on Psychology Today along with a lot of other faces, and I think that's helpful for insurance-based practices too, but they have the benefit of like being on an insurance panel. So people are going to come to them because that's their networking. That's a huge network of the insurance is the network, Their numbers are, and I'll do interviews with some insurance-based practices people here on my channel, but you'll see that the numbers are faster, which is really good because sometimes that's good for people. But also what could be good for other people is, cash-based practices where, Sara, you're going to build slowly and then you're going to have your panel of loyal patients.
Right.
I mean, some will graduate, some will get better, some will leave, but then you still have your steady stream of people coming in too. And then like you're going to have your practice, at at some point of as it grows. And I think that that's really, really cool that you eventually get to that spot where it's like not always like terrifying. Is this going to work?
Right. Yes. I have hope this is actually going to work.
Yeah. I mean, 8 patients in 3 months, that's not a fluke.
Right.
It's working.
Yeah, surely, right?
Yeah.
So I am expecting a lull in July. And again, thanks to you, I know that's the norm. So your program does a really good job at setting expectations for morale, as well as super important for my mental health. For my mental health is so important to know kind of what is normal, to know that, I should have had more patients potentially at the beginning of the semester when all the kids are going back. Maybe I need to ramp up my networking or reach out to the schools specifically. So it helps kind of like guide how you reach out and who you reach out to and what time of the year.
Yeah, that's so smart to tailor your networking at the time of the year. Yeah, that's smart. And I'm actually looking forward to I always saw a lull around the holiday time. And I'm gonna probably send out holiday cards this year because I know things are gonna get slower and hey, remember I'm here.
Yeah.
And just like my network. At this point, I just feel like I have a bunch of friends and they're like my chosen coworkers.
Right.
It's not just, eventually it's not just you alone. It's like, oh, me and I have these 5 therapists that I share a bunch of patients with and I love, and they might as well be my coworkers in quotes,
That's so lovely. Yeah, you build your community. I love that. And yes, your reference to 5 therapists, that's all you need. You just need a very high quality referrals.
Yes.
To build a practice. You don't need, I've networked with, 80 people at this point.
Yes. Yes.
But of that 80, I received 8 referrals, right? So it's 10% are going to be the solid referral source for you. So you are casting your net wide, but then over time it will become tighter and you won't have to be running around the city with donuts and coffee. It will get easier. And then yes, you just cultivate those relationships and really solidify those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. It's you network with a lot of people, but it ends up being you cast that net wide to find your people where it's okay, we really connect. We see the exact same niche, to find those few people that are really gonna that you're really gonna cross refer. Yeah. It's finding those solid few. Yeah. Good. I'm curious what has been, I'm going to ask you about the easiest and the hardest parts about starting up a practice. What's been kind of surprisingly easy?
So surprisingly easy. So the networking itself has been both exhausting but enjoyable. I've loved maybe it's just post-pandemic. I've loved being out of the house. I love just having a purpose and meeting people in Santa Monica or, in the Valley and just getting out and being social and making those connections. And it's so enjoyable, especially when you do resonate with each other. That's exciting. So that's networking, both hard, but also easy and fun. It's my favorite activity to do. Yeah. The EHR was a bit bumpy in the beginning, but again, that's just time and practice getting used to. They do have a good system in terms of emailing you when you have questions. So again, that was just teething and kind of learning how to use new systems. I say that the hardest part, and it was right at the beginning, just setting up, getting getting your accountant, all the paperwork for California, for the city in which you're practicing, and just it's so arduous.
Yeah.
And you can't do it without an attorney who you're throwing $5,000 at, and you can't really do it without.
Yeah, in California specifically, other states are easier, but. God, California is so restrictive and you have to be so, mindful to be compliant. Yeah. And spend some money on some good legal advice. Yeah.
A lot of regulation here. So that was tricky and frustrating. And then something's missing or something wasn't filed in time. And it's, oh my. So that was a lot in the beginning. And honestly, that you just want to crawl under a rock and just have someone else do it for you because it's so frustrating. So yeah, all the admin stuff I didn't enjoy. But then once you're open and then you have, your website and your logo and everything, and and then you're flying and that's great. It's once doors are open and you're seeing patients, it's easy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's nice because you're only going to have to do it once, Yeah. Good. Cool. And then I do have some people, that are interested in the program or that I've just talked to that I noticed are kind of in a similar boat to you. And I'm curious what you would say to them. I get a good amount of people that are interested that have their NP in another specialty, they're an FNP, AGNP, pediatric NP, a variety. And then they are finishing up. They usually contact me around the time they're finishing up their psych NP. And they tell me, well, Alicia, I have experience managing psychiatric conditions in primary care setting, like you in a neurology clinic, and you did primary care, you did both, or, in a peds clinic, in a pediatric practice. And so they tell me, I have experience managing psych conditions. I have experience as a provider and as a nurse practitioner. Now I'm getting my psych NP. Is it fair to consider starting a private practice at this point in my career? Obviously you've done it. So I always say yes, but I'm curious, what would you tell them? What are the benefits about having that background? What things are a little bit harder about having that background? What would you say to like that?
Sure. So I would say for most people coming into psychiatry for their second board certification, whatever you've done for your first board certification, like you've had psych experience, you've seen anxiety, depression, insomnia, you've documented, you've counseled your patients with regards to at least basic lifestyle modifications, or at least basic nutritional or dietary changes to make. You've probably also prescribed SSRIs, at least. Potentially not the antipsychotics, but you've at least prescribed SSRIs. Some have prescribed, stimulants. That's fine. So you know more than you think you do. You're more prepared than you think you do. Obviously, getting the certification really puts you at the forefront of being capable of managing a much, much broader spectrum of psychiatric conditions. And now you are an expert, and you have that, that education, that qualification, that drive to continue learning. So don't be concerned or scared that you are not going to make the mark. You are. It takes time. It takes time to really feel comfortable and confident in your new specialty, whether it's psych or something else. But you have like the basis. You have the basis in terms of like your NP. You're already a nurse practitioner. Like you know how to ask for help when you need it, right? So yeah, I fully encourage anyone with a second who's doing this as a second certification to just go for it. It is an adjustment in terms of, the mentality of going from working for someone else to working for yourself. That's probably a bigger jump than moving from a different specialty into psychiatry. It's the mind shift of now you are the boss and you are responsible for keeping this business afloat and for financially succeeding like that. The marketing and the business aspect is more challenging for me than the psychiatric care or the psychiatric treatment that I'm expected to provide for patients. Like seeing the patients, that's easy, right? Compared to running the business, which is an enormous learning curve and a lot of hard decisions to make, and financially can be very stressful. So yes, if you have, yourself, if you have the drive and you are in such a way inclined that you like to make your own hours, be your own boss, and really cultivate kind of the culture in which you and where you've worked previously hasn't meshed well with your ideals and kind of the way you wish to provide care, then absolutely open a practice and the type of care that patients deserve.
Yeah.
And the lifestyle you deserve.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. I think a lot of nurse practitioners specifically, they've worked in practices that are pushing them to see, 4 people in an hour, or primary care. Oh my gosh. You specifically know how quickly they're, insurance-based practices, or really just a lot of jobs out there are pushing you to see people, more people in an hour. And we of all people having that experience, we want to create practices that patients deserve.
Right.
Yeah. More time and have a focus on like why we all got into doing this as patient, seeing people get better. Right.
Exactly. It wasn't for the RVUs. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Awesome. So I think my last question is, where do you see your practice going in 2024? What do you see in the future?
Well, I hope that the 8 grows. So I hope that it continues to snowball. But I know a lot of that's still going to require work and input from me in terms of continuing to network and foster those relationships with established therapists and providers, as well as reaching out to new ones I haven't reached out to before. So yes, continuing to grow, continuing to research and read up on, holistic interventions, and obviously staying on top of the newer developments and the research and the newer drugs coming out. So I'm looking forward to, meeting up with the drug reps and going to meetings and going to conferences as well, and just learning about new ways to manage standard conditions and really kind of finessing my treatment approach for each diagnosis.
Yeah. Just getting like better.
Yeah, exactly. getting better, providing better care. Yeah. And learning as I go. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, amazing. Well, thanks for joining. Anything else that you feel like people should know?
They should do your mentorship program.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad I helped you so much. That makes me happy.
You did. You saved me a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of stress. So, I mean, it is possible to figure out all this on your own. Don't do it to yourself.
Yeah.
Enough on your plate. Like, everyone has enough on their plate. Like, you have laid it out for us. And there are, within the platform you have, there's so many resources available in terms of like finding a collaborator and finding an attorney and finding a CPA, and then just the lectures themselves. So this is how you create, a letterhead. This is how, like, everything that you would need to know, all the details. It's been like it's an instruction manual, and so yeah, highly valuable. Like I'd still be figuring it out now, I think.
Yeah, it speeds up the process, so you're not like spinning your wheels and there's
down rabbit holes. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just like, this was one of the best career decisions I ever made, was opening this up to meet people like you, and just like watching you flourish is just like, oh, it just makes me so excited, and I can't wait to do a follow-up interview maybe in the future.